You're unstoppable, Dale, Frank Sterling had slurred, raising his glass. I felt it too, that rush of invincibility leaving Liberty Bar, ignoring Mark's shouted warning about the ice. The slick black top snatched the wheel, slamming me into a world of fractured glass and twisted steel. Later, Dr. Evans stood over my bed, his voice flat. You won't walk unassisted again, Mr. Peterson. The taste of victory still lingered on my tongue, sweet and sharp, like the expensive scotch Frank Sterling had poured. We were at Liberty Bar, the firm's unofficial clubhouse, a place thick with the scent of aged leather and ambition. 3 signatures, Frank had said, raising his glass. Just 3 more to make partner. He'd clap me on the shoulder, his grip firm, his voice booming over the subdued chatter. The future of our firm, Dale, he'd declared. I saw the nods around the table, the respectful glances from the younger associates. I was 29 years old, and the world, it seemed, was finally bending to my will. Leaving the bar, the cold air bit at my cheeks. Mark, one of the junior associates I'd brought along, called out from the curb. Hey, Dale, you should grab an Uber. Roads are getting slick. I just waved a hand, dismissing his concern. The Porsche felt good under me, a low growl from the engine. Invincible was the word that came to mind. The city lights blurred into streaks of color as I picked up speed, heading for the highway. Then the world turned inside out. A flash of headlights, too bright, too close. A patch of black ice I never saw. The car hydroplaned, the steering wheel bucking violently in my hands. A deafening crunch of metal, the shriek of tires, and then darkness. The silence that followed was even louder than the impact. I woke to the sterile hum of a hospital room, the air thick with disinfectant. The first thing I saw was Clara's face, swollen with tears, her hand gripping mine. Her usually bright eyes were clouded with worry. Massachusetts General. That was the name on the papers taped to the wall. Dr. Evans came in a few hours later, a tall man with tired eyes and a clipped, professional tone. He held a clipboard, his words measured, direct. Severe spinal cord injury, Mr. Peterson. L2, L3 fracture. The probability of you ever walking unassisted is exceedingly low. My mind rejected the words. Doctors always exaggerated, always prepared for the worst. I'd walk again. I had to. This was just a setback, a challenge. But the hospital quickly became my prison. The soft sheets felt alien. The constant beeping of monitors a torment. The humiliation started subtly. Nurses, kind but firm, helping me with the most basic functions. The cold shock of the bedpan, the mortifying conversations about whether my bladder would ever function normally again. My body, once a tool of my ambition, was now a fragile, unresponsive stranger. Physical therapy was a daily ritual of agony. Tiny movements, fractions of an inch, celebrated as monumental victories. Lifting a finger, wiggling a toe that barely responded. Sweat stung my eyes as I strained, muscles screaming, but nothing much happened. The world outside the window seemed to mock my confinement. Clara was my anchor. She was there every day, pulling up a chair, sleeping fitfully by my bedside. She brought stacks of medical journals, researching experimental treatments, her brow furrowed in concentration. She fought with the insurance company on the phone, her voice tight with frustration, but always calm when she turned back to me. I watched her, so tired, so dedicated, and a cold dread began to settle in my gut. I was a burden, a heavy, unmoving weight. The visits from my colleagues dwindled. Frank Sterling came once, looking uncomfortable, talking about recovery and taking all the time you need. He didn't mention my partnership. Mark sent a fruit basket, then a card. The phone stopped ringing. The world I'd dominated, the future I'd so confidently claimed, was slowly, silently moving on without me. Mark showed up a week later, fidgeting with the brim of his baseball cap. He clutched a brown paper bag from a coffee shop, but he didn't offer me any. His eyes darted around the room, settling on the ceiling, the Ive pole, anywhere but my face. He cleared his throat. Frank sent me, Dale, just to give you an update. The firm was putting me on indefinite medical leave. It's just temporary, man, he mumbled, the lie hanging thick in the air between us. He knew it, and I knew he knew it. He shifted his weight, his discomfort palpable, then made an excuse about needing to get back to the office, disappearing as quickly as he'd arrived. Frank Sterling, the man who had toasted me as the firm's future, never once came to visit. His absence was louder than any words Mark could have spoken. It was a clear, cold signal of my new place, or rather, my lack of one. The firm had simply cut me loose, without a word, without a fight. 3 weeks had passed since the accident when Kyle Miller finally showed up. He was my best friend, my best man, the kind of guy who'd always been there. But now he walked in like a ghost, his shoulders hunched, his eyes bloodshot. The faint smell of stale whiskey clung to him. He stammered something about a particularly grueling case, about having his head down, but he couldn't look at me. Not really. His gaze kept sliding off my face, landing on my hands, my chest, the blankets covering my legs. "So now I'm what, Kyle?" I asked, my voice flat, almost an accusation. He flinched, his jaw tightening. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Nothing came out. He looked away, fiddling with a button on his shirt. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. He couldn't say it. He couldn't say what I was now, not out loud. Later that evening, I heard their voices from the hallway, hushed at first, then rising. Kyle and Clara. He must have followed her out after she'd gone to get more ice. The hospital walls were thin, and the words, though muffled, carried. "You're still young, Clara," Kyle's voice, rough with whiskey, pleaded. "You really want to spend the next 40 years changing his catheters and pushing his wheelchair?" A sharp, distinct sound cut through the air. A slap, not hard but clear. Then Clara's voice, colder than I'd ever heard it. "Don't you dare tell me about love or commitment, Kyle. Don't you ever. Now get out." The door clicked shut a moment later. I lay perfectly still, feigning sleep. The tears came silently from Clara first, gentle sniffles from the armchair beside my bed. Then, despite myself, I felt them prickling at my own eyes, hot and slow. Kyle's words, crude and cruel as they were, had planted a seed of truth, a bitter truth I couldn't shake. Was this my future? Was this hers? The day I finally left the hospital was supposed to be a triumph. Instead, coming home was worse. Our luxurious apartment, a space once filled with light and potential, now felt like a foreign country. It was an obstacle course. Clara, bless her practical heart, had been busy. Grab bars lined the bathroom walls, cold chrome reflecting the harsh reality. Furniture had been pushed aside, creating wide pathways for a wheelchair. The dining room, where we'd once hosted dinner parties, was now my bedroom, the grand table and chairs replaced by a hospital bed, its cranks and levers stark against the elegant wallpaper. Every adaptation, every thoughtful change, was a fresh reminder of what I had lost. The silence of the apartment felt deeper, heavier than the hum of the hospital. The apartment, even after Clara's diligent efforts to make it accessible, felt airless. I sat in my wheelchair by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. I could hear Clara in the kitchen, her voice muffled, then rising in pitch. Her mother, Martha. Martha had never liked me, always thought I was too slick, too ambitious, not stable enough for her daughter. "You're throwing away your youth, Clara," Martha's voice crackled, even through the closed door. "For a man who can't even provide for you anymore. It's not fair to you." Then a name I hadn't heard in years. "Roger Allen. He's divorced now, a partner at Goldman Sachs. Always had a thing for you, you know." A sharp intake of breath from Clara. "Are you seriously trying to set me up?" she hissed, her voice tight with suppressed fury, "while my husband is in the next room?" The phone slammed down, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. Just as the quiet settled, the doorbell buzzed. A courier in a crisp uniform handed Clara a large envelope. "Oakwood and Stone." My heart gave a pathetic lurch. "An early retirement package," the letter stated, formal and cold. 7 years of my life gone. The severance was a joke, a pittance that wouldn't cover a month of our medical bills. It felt like a final, insulting slap. I wheeled myself back to the dining room, my makeshift bedroom, and found Clara still standing by the counter, holding the letter. "She's right," I snapped, the words bitter in my mouth. "Your mother's right, Clara. I'm just a burden now." Clara dropped the letter. She knelt before my wheelchair, her eyes, usually so bright, now clouded with a raw intensity. Her hands reached for my arms. "Don't you dare, Dale," she said, her voice low and fierce. "Don't you dare let them make you believe you're worthless." I slammed my fist against the armrest of my wheelchair. The dull thud was pathetic. "I can't walk. I can't work. What the hell am I supposed to do now?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, unanswerable. Her hands moved from my arms to my face, cupping my cheeks. Her touch was firm, grounding. "You're going to fight," she declared, her eyes blazing. "We're going to fight. We're going to show all of them what a mistake they made." But fighting felt impossible. The bills piled up, forming an intimidating tower on the kitchen counter. We had to move. Downsized, Clara called it. Our sprawling, luxurious apartment was exchanged for a smaller, accessible unit in Somerville. It was practical, efficient, but felt utterly devoid of life. I sold the Mercedes, the last gleaming symbol of my former self. Clara took on extra freelance marketing work, her eyes often shadowed with exhaustion, working late into the nights after caring for me all day. I spiraled. The physical therapy seemed pointless. The small increments of progress felt like mockery. I stopped going. I stopped caring. I spent hours calculating. Cold, hard numbers. How much better off Clara would be without me, without this dead weight. One evening, I tried to transfer myself from the wheelchair to the toilet. My arms gave out, and I fell, hitting the tiled floor with a sickening thud. The pain was immediate, sharp, but it was the humiliation that truly crippled me. I lay there for what felt like an hour, unable to move, unable to call for help. Clara was out getting groceries. When she finally came back, her face went pale and she struggled to lift me. That night, after I heard the soft, steady rhythm of her breathing from her makeshift bed in the living room, I wheeled myself into the kitchen. The OxyContin Dr. Evans had prescribed for the pain sat in a small orange bottle. I lined the pills up on the counter, a neat, clinical row. Beside them, I poured a generous measure of whiskey into a glass. On a small notepad, I wrote a note, my handwriting surprisingly steady. "My dearest Clara, this is my last act of love. I'm setting you free." The click of the front door startled me. Clara, home early from Sarah's, where she'd gone for a rare girls' night out. Her eyes landed on the pills, then the whiskey, then the note. Her face drained of all color. "Go back to Sarah's," I whispered, my voice rough. She didn't move. Instead, she walked slowly toward me, picked up the note, and read it. Her gaze met mine, unblinking. Then, with deliberate, almost surgical precision, she tore the note into tiny, irreparable pieces. "No," she said, her voice quiet at first, then growing louder, steel beneath the softness. "You don't get to decide this. You don't get to leave me." Clara's firm no had been a punch to the gut, clearing the fog from my head, if only for a moment. The darkness hadn't lifted entirely, but her defiance had sparked something. I agreed begrudgingly to recommit to therapy. It was a grind, agonizingly slow. Each session felt like chipping away at a granite wall with a spoon. I focused on micro improvements. The slight twitch in my quadricep, the ability to shift my weight an inch to the left. Clara's fierce, unwavering hope was a constant, if sometimes suffocating, fuel. She'd cheer for the smallest victory, her smile unwavering, even when my own resolve crumbled. She continued to work tirelessly, taking on every freelance design project she could get. Her laptop was always open, her fingers flying across the keyboard late into the night. She often came home late, her shoulders slumped, her eyes heavy-lidded with exhaustion. I started to notice small things. Her phone calls, hushed, in the other room. A vague excuse for why she was sometimes 30 minutes later than usual. A new subtle distance in her eyes. A look that seemed to float past me, as if seeing something I couldn't. I told myself it was just exhaustion, the burden of our situation, my own lingering self-pity clouding my judgment. I pushed the unease down. One afternoon, a rare outing, we went to a local diner. The familiar scent of frying onions and stale coffee offered a fleeting comfort. For a moment, it felt like our old life, a memory of normalcy. But Clara seemed distracted. Her gaze kept wandering, out the window to other tables. She picked at her sandwich, offering short monosyllabic answers to my attempts at conversation. I started to occupy myself with my old legal books. The heavy tomes, once symbols of my past ambition, now offered a different kind of solace. I'd pore over case law, read articles on legal reform, anything to re-engage my mind. A flicker of my old ambition, dormant for so long, reignited. I tried to be more supportive, to take some of the emotional weight off Clara, but my physical limitations still gnawed at me. The frustration would bubble over in sudden, sharp outbursts, often directed at the very person trying to help me. Then, the small changes became harder to ignore. A new silk scarf she hadn't owned before. A subtly styled haircut, one I hadn't seen her get. She'd explain it away as client meetings. Her clients I knew were mostly online, rarely requiring face-to-face meetings, and certainly not the kind that demanded a fresh look. Kyle's words, sharp and bitter, echoed in my mind from the hospital hallway. You really want to spend the next 40 years changing his catheters and pushing his wheelchair? A cold dread began to settle in my gut, a slow, creeping fear I tried to deny. One evening, while looking for a pen, I rummaged through her purse. My fingers brushed against a folded receipt. A downtown restaurant, the Gilded Spoon. I knew that place. It was expensive, the kind of restaurant we used to go to for celebrations, definitely out of our current budget. The date on the receipt was from 2 weeks ago, a Tuesday night, a night she'd told me she was working late on a project. What's this? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, holding up the receipt when she came into the room. Clara's shoulders stiffened. Her eyes, which had been so weary, suddenly sharpened. Oh, that, she said, her explanation flimsy, vague about a client lunch that somehow stretched into dinner. Her defensiveness, the quick flicker of guilt in her eyes, was unmistakable. I felt like I was observing my own life from a distance, watching the pieces slide out of alignment. Nothing quite fit anymore. The careful facade of our recovery, our shared struggle, was beginning to crack. I needed to regain control. Not just over my body, the frustrating limbs that wouldn't obey, but over my life, and over our dwindling finances, which felt more precarious by the day. The unease kept growing, a small, cold knot in my stomach. I started checking Clara's schedule, discreetly, almost unconsciously. A quick glance at the calendar on the fridge, a passing question about her day. I noticed the inconsistencies. She'd say she was working on a project at the library, but her bag wasn't there when I later looked for it. Small things easily explained away, but they began to stack up. One Tuesday evening, Clara said she was going to Sarah's for a girls' night. She kissed me on the forehead, her lips cool. An hour later, a thought cold and clear hit me. I called Sarah. Her voice was cheerful, then confused. Clara? No, she hasn't been here tonight, Dale. Is everything all right? I mumbled something about a mix-up and hung up. When Clara came home much later, smelling faintly of something sweet, not Sarah's usual cheap wine, I asked her about it. Oh, we decided to go to a new place last minute, she said too quickly. Sarah must have forgotten to tell you. It sounded hollow. The emotional distance between us became a canyon. We moved through our days in strained silence, punctuated by forced cheerfulness, like actors playing a role. Every conversation felt like walking on thin ice. I pushed myself harder into my research, looking for new avenues. Disability law, consulting for smaller firms, working from home. A desperate need for independence fueled me. I needed to prove to myself and to her that I wasn't useless, that I could still provide, still contribute. It was during one of my late-night research sessions that it happened. Clara's phone lay on the charger, forgotten on the armrest of the couch. A notification popped up, a text message. My eyes, almost by accident, skimmed the preview. Not a name, just a number, but the words, fragments. Can't wait to see you, and thinking of you too. Too intimate for a professional relationship, too casual for a platonic one. A cold dread, far worse than anything Kyle Miller's words had caused, settled in my gut. My hand trembled as I picked up the phone. I unlocked it, her simple passcode no longer a barrier. There it was. A string of messages, recent ones. My eyes scanned them and the blood drained from my face. Kyle Miller. His casual language, the specific phrases I'd heard him use 1,000 times. The way he always called Clara, Claire Bear. It was him, my best friend, my best man. The memory of Kyle's cruel advice to Clara in the hospital, words I tried to dismiss as drunken bluster, replayed in my mind with a new, horrifying context. You really want to spend the next 40 years changing his catheters and pushing his wheelchair? He hadn't been offering advice. He'd been laying the groundwork. When Clara walked into the room, I didn't look up. I simply pushed the phone across the table, the screen still open to their conversation. What is this, Clara? My voice was a whisper, shaking with a disbelief that cut deeper than any physical pain. She glanced at the phone, her face going utterly white. She opened her mouth to deny it, but no words came out. Then the facade cracked. The carefully constructed wall of her composure crumbled, and she broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm so sorry, Dale. I'm so sorry. Her voice was choked, raw. She blamed her loneliness, my depression, the endless struggle. She admitted it had been going on for months, a secret she'd kept while I was at my most vulnerable, while I lay broken and helpless. A profound sense of humiliation washed over me, a betrayal that felt worse than the accident itself. The crash had only broken my body. This had broken something far more fundamental. I questioned everything, her unwavering support during those dark days, her tireless sacrifices, my entire understanding of our life together. Every kind word, every comforting touch now felt tainted, a performance. The world had shifted on its axis again, and I was left, once more, exposed and alone. How life's costly choices unfold, you might wonder. Stick around to the end to see Prim. Who is it? I demanded, the words raw, tearing at my throat. Clara, still hunched over, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, finally whispered it. Kyle. The name hung in the air, a hammer blow to my chest. Kyle. Not just my wife, but my best friend. The double betrayal felt like a physical assault, a cold, sickening lurch in my gut. A furious rage, dormant since the accident, now surged through me, hot and blinding. My hands, usually clumsy, moved with a sudden, precise anger. I grabbed my phone, fingers flying across the screen. I called Kyle. His voice was thick with sleep, then confusion. Dale, everything okay? Get over here, Kyle, I said, my voice dangerously calm, the control a thin veneer over the inferno within. Now. I hung up before he could stammer out another question. He said he'd be here in 15 minutes. 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Kyle walked in, looking uncomfortable, his eyes darting between Clara and me. He tried to offer flimsy excuses, a mumbled apology. Dale, man, I can explain. It's not what you think. Isn't it? I asked, my voice still unnaturally quiet. I looked from Kyle's pale face to Clara's tear-streaked one. So, this is it. The dynamic duo. My words were sharp, cutting through Kyle's cowardice, Clara's guilt. After all the speeches, all the promises, this is what it comes to. Clara tried to speak, to justify, to plead for understanding. Dale, I was so lonely, so exhausted. You were so distant, so depressed. I silenced her with a raised hand. Lonely? Exhausted? My voice rose, the anger finally breaking through the calm. You think I wasn't? You think lying there, wondering if I'd ever walk again, fighting off thoughts of ending it all, was a walk in the park? You promised we'd fight this together, Clara. You tore up that note, remember? You told me I didn't get to leave you. Kyle, seeing an opening, tried to minimize his role. Look, Dale, she was going through a lot, and you were different. It just kind of happened. It wasn't planned. He tried to blame Clara, to save face, to paint himself as an unwitting participant. The casual way he dismissed my life, my struggle, ignited a fresh surge of fury. Oh, it wasn't planned? I said, my gaze fixed on him. Funny, because I remember overhearing you in the hospital, Kyle, telling my wife she was still young, asking her if she really wanted to spend the next 40 years changing his catheters and pushing his wheelchair. I watched his face drain of color, the mask of feigned innocence finally falling away. You were laying the groundwork, weren't you? While I was lying there, broken, you were already circling. The words hung heavy in the air, revealing his long-standing malice, his calculated cruelty. Get out, I said, pointing to the door. my arm trembling with effort. Get out of my home. And don't you ever, ever come back. Kyle didn't argue. He turned, his shoulders slumped, and walked out, the door closing softly behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara, still on the floor, looked up at me, her eyes pleading. Dale, please, don't give up on us. We can fix this. But the trust, like my spine, felt irrevocably broken. There is no us, Clara, I said, my voice hollow, devoid of any emotion. This is over. The betrayal. It's too deep to mend. The apartment, once a symbol of our new beginning, our quiet resilience, now felt like a tomb of broken promises, a monument to a life that had shattered, piece by agonizing piece. The confrontation with Clara and Kyle had left a void, but also a strange, sharp clarity. The anger, once a consuming fire, now settled into a cold resolve. I needed to rebuild, not just my body, but my entire life on my own terms. This time without illusion, without false promises. I channeled every ounce of pain, every humiliation into a relentless path of physical and emotional recovery. The divorce from Clara was swift, quiet. I took little beyond what I could physically manage, what was practical for my accessible apartment. The luxury goods, the grand furniture, the symbols of our past life, I left them. I walked away with my dignity, a bruised but intact sense of self. The fallout for Clara and Kyle was, as I later learned, significant. Their affair became public knowledge, whispered among our mutual acquaintances, amplified by the small, tight-knit circles of our professional world. Clara struggled. Her freelance work dried up, clients quietly drifting away. Her social standing, once so vibrant, crumbled. Kyle Miller's reputation was ruined. The firm, a place built on trust and discretion, quietly sidelined him, then let him go. The professional opportunities he'd once taken for granted vanished, replaced by a string of denials and closed doors. Meanwhile, I found a new purpose. Against all odds, the law called me back, but a different kind of law. I delved into disability law, advocating for others who face similar struggles, using my own story as a powerful, undeniable tool. My experience, once my greatest weakness, became my greatest strength. I started a small practice, tucked away in an accessible building, focused on giving a voice to the voiceless, navigating the bureaucratic labyrinth for those who couldn't fight for themselves. It wasn't the high-stakes corporate world of oak, wood, and stone, but it was a success of a different kind, richer, more meaningful. I worked hard, pushing my physical limits in therapy, determined to reclaim as much of my mobility as possible. Years passed. Slowly, painfully, I began to walk with the aid of a cane for short distances, each step a small victory. I built a new independent life, finding peace in the quiet rhythms of my work, in the small, meaningful victories for my clients. My strength was no longer a display of youthful arrogance, but a quiet, hard-won resilience. Then one Tuesday afternoon, the receptionist buzzed me. 2 walk-ins, Mr. Peterson. They say they know you. My heart gave a familiar, dull thud. They stood in my office, figures from a distant, painful past. Clara and Kyle. They were disheveled, the tailored suits and designer dresses replaced by worn, slightly faded clothes. Their faces were etched with desperation, stripped of the polish and arrogance I remembered. They looked smaller, humbler. Kyle's hair was thinning. Clara's eyes held a haunted look. They knelt almost, not in supplication, but from the sheer weight of their brokenness, begging for help with a legal matter, a lost investment, a claim of fraud. I looked at them, not with triumph, but with a quiet sense of observation. I saw the hollow consequences of their choices, the long, slow unraveling of lives built on fleeting desires. There was no joy in their downfall, only the stark reality of what people leave in their wake. I will consider your case, I said, my voice calm, professional, devoid of emotion. But the price for justice, for my help, will be steep. I was no longer the golden boy, the ambitious young lawyer with the world at his feet. I was a man forged by fire, tempered by pain, standing tall in my own right, facing the architects of my pain on my own terms. My path was no longer defined by the corner office or the speed of a German-engineered car. It was now a quiet, hard-won journey. I learned that dignity wasn't found in what I own, but in what I refused to surrender. Claire and Kyle, once figures of my past, found their lives entangled in a slow, inevitable unraveling. Their choices had consequences, visible now in their haggard faces and humbled postures. When they came to my office begging for legal help, there was no surge of triumph, only a calm, factual assessment of their situation. I saw the empty years ahead of them, the quiet misery born of their own hands. I offered no mercy, only the cold, unyielding structure of the law. The price I set for my assistance would be fair, but substantial, a mirror reflecting the cost of their own past actions. I had lost everything, only to find myself, not the golden boy, but a man forged by fire, standing tall in his own right, on his own terms.